Hello and welcome to Talking Whisky. My name is Grant and today I'm going to be talking about bourbon labelling. So before we dive into the different labels that you can get on a bourbon, let's quickly recap on what makes a bourbon a bourbon. So the first thing is that it's made and produced in America. Now the second thing is that the mash bill that you use for it is above 51% corn. And the third thing is when you mature it in new charred American oak barrels. And then the other 2 points are around the distilling and then the barreling process. So the first one is when it comes off of the still, it cannot be above 160 proof. And then the second one is when it goes into the barrel, it cannot be above 125 proof. And if you want to learn a little bit more about proofing, check out this link up here. So now that we've done a quick recap of that, let's go over labeling. Now, there are kind of 5 main categories of labeling. The first one is going to be just a bourbon. The second one is going to be a straight bourbon. And then the next one's going to be, well, that one's kind of a little bit more complicated, but we'll just call it a bourbon again for now. And then you've got a bottled and bond bourbon, and then you've got a finished bourbon. So the first one's just a bourbon. Now there is no minimum time limit on the amount of time that the whiskey has to spend time maturing in the barrel. So hypothetically speaking, you can take your new make spirit that you've proofed down to below 125 proof, and then you can then put it in your barrel for a day, let it mature for a day, and then you can then bottle it, you can then bottle it, and then you can then sell it as a bourbon. Now, obviously most distilleries aren't going to be doing that depending where you are and depending on what climate they're in. If you're in Texas, for example, they've got a very hot climate, so you could probably get away with something that's 6 months old and call it a bourbon and it still be pretty damn good. So the second example is a straight bourbon, and that also then helps me to explain a regular bourbon. So straight bourbon has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years. So for example, Maker's Mark is a Kentucky straight bourbon. Now, Kentucky means it comes from Kentucky, and there are certain different regulations or rules about what you can be to be called a Kentucky bourbon with different processes, but it's straight. So we know it's aged for a minimum of 2 years. Now, just to be confusing, let's hop back to regular bourbon. So this is the Iron Root Harbinger, which is labeled as a regular bourbon. Now they do actually give an age statement on it where they say it's aged for at least 24 months, but they haven't done straight on it because there's not a minimum of that amount of time. Now another thing with straight bourbon is you've got this weird butter zone where you have older than 2 years to be calling it a straight bourbon, but younger than 4 years. Now the younger than 4 years means that you have to have an age statement on it. So if it's older than 2 years and younger than 4 years, you can call it a straight bourbon, but you have to place an age statement on it regardless. So if you've got a bourbon that is 3 months old, you have to put the age statement on it because it's under 4 years. Now there is then another category called a bottled and bond bourbon. Now that has a restriction about being older than 4 years. Now I'm actually going to do a different video about that one because it's got some really strict rules on it. You've then got another category which is older than 4 years. It's not bottled and bond. So it kind of falls back into, you could call it just a bourbon again, because you don't have to put an age statement on it and you don't have to call it straight. So the fifth category is then a bourbon that's been finished. So for example, I've got here the Crowded Barrel Eleanor, and this has been finished in a Cinsault wine cask. So on the label it says a straight bourbon finished in a Cinsault wine cask. Now when you've got a bourbon and you're deciding to finish it, you're taking it out of its maturing cask and you're putting it in something else. So this one, for example, is a wine cask. You can use port casks, sherry casks, whatever cask you want. Now, an interesting thing when you do that is you actually have to get that label approved specifically for what you're doing. So if you decide that you've got your nice straight bourbon that is, say, 3 years old, so you're going to put an age statement on it to say it's 3 years old, but you're going to finish it for a little bit. When you finish it, you need to get approval to say what you're finishing it in, and then that has to specifically go on the label. So I appreciate that that is kind of confusing because it doesn't need to be. So let's quickly go over it again. So you can call it a bourbon up to 2 years old, as long as it's been aged in new charred American oak. Then when it is older than 2 years old, you can now call it a straight bourbon. However, before it gets to being 4 years old, you have to put an age statement on it regardless. Then you've got bottled and bond, but I'm going to do a separate video on that one. And then you've got the outlier, which is a finished bourbon, which can go into either one of those categories beforehand, apart from the bottled and bond. But then you have to specifically say on the label what bourbon or what cask you're finishing it in. So hopefully that's made understanding labeling on a bourbon a little bit easier. If you guys have any other suggestions, don't forget to give a comment down below. Give a like, share and subscribe, and of course, Cheers to you all.